burnt siennas are made the same. So I actually have 3 of them in my stash, and looking at them, they all look the same. But actually their formulation of pigment is different, and you've got to look at the small print to see that difference. Now, I recently watched a video from Jackson Art that talked about pigment, and I'm going to link that. And it is fascinating when you start looking at the small numbers on your paint and you discover what it's actually made of. And I kind of just took it as read that burnt sienna was burnt sienna, but in fact it isn't. So if we look at the golden one for starters, obviously you've got the usual markings. Down here it tells you it's semi-transparent. You can see the markings sort of through that paint sample on the front. But the bit I want to show you is this number here. And I just need to see whether the camera can pick that up. Let's just, here we go. So that actually says PBR7. And that's referring to the pigment that's in burnt sienna that makes that colour. And that's the pigment that Golden have chosen to use to make that colour. So if I look at, hang on, let me just refocus that. There we go. So if you look at system 3, for example, and you look at their markings, they use a transparent red oxide, which is PR101. So although these are called the same, they actually aren't. And Sennelier, they actually have a whole lot more in theirs. They've got a PY42, a PR101, they've got a black, and they've got PB, another black, which is a PB7, PBK7. So what does that look like in real terms? Well, let's take a little out of the tube and see what it looks like. So we've got this one here. That's the Sennelier. You can see it's quite a chocolate color brown. I'll clean my water. Let's have a look at the golden, which is also a burnt sienna. It's very highly pigmented, I might add, so this is going to go a really long way. Let's just make sure that is not too wet. You can see it's different again. And then if we go to the system 3, you can see that is a lot different. It looks a bit watery. More orange. A lot different from this one, which was the first one we did. So in line with that, that's a PR101 transparent. I have something else that is the same pigment, PR101 transparent. That's a liquid ink. Let's see what that looks like. So that, in theory, should be very similar to that because it's the same pigment. So I'll put a drop of that on. You can see it's got orange quality already. Yeah. So not dissimilar actually to that one, which is the same color pigment. Obviously from brand to brand they'll have different formulations, and how much they put in it and what they're obviously using medium to create a transparency. But yeah, fascinating to see how those two could be similar. Now this is again the same pigment, transparent. This is a red oxide. So again, it should, in theory, be similar to these. So if I put a little of that, you can see that orangey color coming up again. So actually it's a bit more red, which is surprising. So yeah, different again, but not dissimilar to those. Certainly not nearly as chocolate brown as that one, which had a yellow in it, a red, brown. It had that PR. That's the same, this same pigment that's in there, and then 2 blacks. So it's worth having a look at the numbers to see about the pigments, because that might give you a clue as to how they might interact with other colors. Because you can imagine if we mix those with white or even a purple, you're going to get a different shade depending on which one you use. So I found that really interesting. I also found it really interesting because the flip side of having all these different colors, they're called burnt sienna, and in fact they're very different. I had a look at my turquoise collection, and it is extensive. All these, it's a color I obviously really, really like. So all the colors here, regardless of the brand, have something in common with each other, which make up a turquoise. So, and those 2 colors that you often find in turquoise paint is PG7 and a blue 15.3. So those 2 actually have the same, but they might have different ratios, but in essence, they are the same color. Equally, this one, which I bought thinking I don't have that color, it's exactly the same 2 colors that make up these 2 tubes. So there's a really good chance that when I open this one, it's going to look a lot like that one. Here's another one. That's another one, PB15, PG7. So again, these should all be very similar to each other. And then if you add white, you'll get that. So white, titanium white, for example, that's PW6. You'll see that all over anything that's sort of a light color. That's the color they tend to use to lighten up a shade, as we do when we paint. So that's going to be in the same family. Now, in terms of the golden colors, this is what they are when they're in their individual state. So you can see there PB15-3 and PG7. So those 2 colors make up those colors. So that's where it gets interesting. And this one is PB15. So again, that and that will be fairly similar, and they're called the same thing, just different companies, but in theory they should look very similar to each other. So shall we test it out? Right. What was that one? Oh, and that's another one. That's another PG15. So we've got, let's not get confused here. Right, so these 3 should in theory be similar. So let's see what they look like. So obviously that's an acrylic ink. So let's make sure we got a nice clean brush here. Oh yeah, that's a good color, isn't it? So that was the Liquitex. This is the golden. I'm not putting a lot down because it's really highly pigmented. And oh yeah, you see what I mean? Very, very similar colors. And again, this is going to be the same. So that's a little bit diluted because it's just coming out of the... Wow, look at that. So very, very similar colors. So 3 different companies, but they're all using the same pigment. So they're all going to be pretty similar to each other. So that's interesting. Now, in terms of the green, there's this one. And no, that's a combination. So here's the green on its own. So again, very highly pigmented, so you don't need a lot. So, and I don't actually quite like that green on its own. So in theory, if I mix that green in with these colors, oh yeah, you can see it there. You're getting that turquoise. That's a much nicer color. I like turquoise. So by mixing those together, we're getting a turquoise, which means in theory, because I mixed those two colors, these should be the same. So let's see, this is Turquoise Deep by Liquitex. Let's see if my recipe, I haven't tried this, so I don't know what it's going to look like. I could be completely wrong here, but we'll find out. Let's see. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, you can definitely see how that and those, same color family, because of course they're using the same pigment. So let's see what this one's like. So, and I appreciate I'm using sort of slightly creamy paper here, but it was just because I got excited about it and I wanted to show you. I just grabbed what I had nearby. So again, there's that turquoise, definitely in the same color family. And if I wash that brush out again, this isn't open, so I'm not going to open that. So, yep, there we go. I would say that is kind of very, very similar to that. Now, in theory, if we add white, so I'll grab some white here. This is my next test. So let's throw a bit of white into the mix. And again, every company would add a different amount of white, but I should, in theory, get something very similar from these three colors by adding white. So you're getting a lovely teal. Let's see what this does. Oh yeah, very nice. These are colors I like. There we go. And I don't know whether this one will mix because it looks like it's dried a bit, but let's give it a go anyway. Oh yeah. So obviously the concentration of white to teal is different, but definitely in the same color family. Those ones are so similar, it's quite interesting. Now, by that token, this, which is white, PB 15.3 and PG7, should be the same as those because we're using the same pigments in each of those colors. So they should, in theory, be the same. And I would agree that that is definitely sitting in the same family. So there you go. I guarantee once you watch the video about pigment, you'll go through your stash of colors and be fascinated at how much crossover you have. I found another one here. So we've got Dioxazine Purple and Quinacridone Magenta, which is a really common color. You see this a lot. Those two, in theory, should make this one, which is a Purple Lake by Daler Rowney. But if you check the pigments here, this pigments are the same as these two. So let's give it a go. Why not? So there's your Quinacridone Magenta. And I suppose you don't need a lot of this purple. Just a tiny, tiny little dot of purple to get that color. I'm going to make sure I've got a really clean brush. Oh, let me grab a new one. Right, so there's that quinacridone. And the purple. There we go. Oh, that purple is very overpowering. But is it? Like this. Let's see. Oh yeah. Ta-da! Oh wow, look. That is pretty much a match. I'm rather impressed with that. So there you go. I hope you found that interesting. I guarantee you're going to be looking at all of your paint supplies in a different way. Go check out the little numbers on the side of them. Obviously, the more expensive paints have that information on it. If you're buying something like, you know, a craft paint, they don't. They leave you in the dark. But if you look at it, you know, your System 3 or your Liquitex, they give you all that information. And you might find that you've been buying the same color twice just from two different companies. There are slight variations, as we saw, but equally, if you're looking for a burnt sienna and you think, well, I've been using golden, I'll just buy one from someone else, you might be surprised at the color difference and that they aren't exactly the same. So, well, I hope you found that informative. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, give it a thumbs up.